Hey, we are two Star Wars nerds, and we have a very special friend with us, Mr. XWing. And today we're talking about lightsaber forms. But before we get going, man, how's it going, XWing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm excited to talk about this because this is something that people don't delve into enough. I feel like, I put a post out on Twitter the other day and I got a response. It blew up a little bit and I got a response, and somebody said to me, if you know the answer to this question, you should probably go outside.
That's funny. And here you are inside doing a stream because
about to talk about it. Hate on, haters. Hate on.
Oh, that's so funny. But you're so right. There's so much information about the forms, and it's almost like the deeper you go, you find out there's more and more and more. Mm-hmm. And so basically what we're going to do, if you've been watching any of our shorts on the forms, this is going to be a little longer form version of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the forms in a little more detail. We're going to talk about their use, some practitioners. We're going to bring up our favorites, and we might even start getting into the realm a little bit of like when is this best used, kind of like who has the upper hand. But we were even talking before this recording, it gets really complicated really quick, mm-hmm. because a form isn't just a cut and dry thing. Everything has a lightsaber wielder behind it, and a personality and a temperament and mm-hmm. level of forceability and connectedness. And this could easily be encyclopedias trying to explain this stuff. And so we're going to just start scratching the surface. And yes. If you guys like this and want like a crazy deep dive live stream, let us know and we will maybe do our best. We'll see. So here we go. So first, we're going to talk about a very unique form that you don't hear about a lot. And this is Form 0. And the reason you don't hear about it a lot is, I don't know if it's exactly a lightsaber form. Technically, in like Lucasfilm canon, from Star Wars encyclopedias, it is a form. It was taught by Master Yoda. But basically what this was, is it was learning how to wield an unignited lightsaber, especially for Padawans. And so Yoda would teach this. And essentially, this is the idea. If you're a Jedi and you're meant to serve and protect the galaxy, how do you do that without just first resorting to violence? Mm-hmm. Because you have this powerful weapon. So how do you do that by actually meditating what's going to happen after you ignite that lightsaber? And so, just kind of right off the bat, this one's a little bit different. I just want to know your guys' opinions on Form 0, because that's pretty much what we know, but it's important because it's like this basis for lightsaber instruction. And then from there, we actually get into like the meat of today's video, all of the forms.
Right.
But what do you guys think about Form 0?
I feel like it's interesting because 0 is one of those ones I feel like it's open almost to interpretation. Like it's almost like a battle meditation state. It's really the choice that you're making before you ignite the lightsaber. So they say in the book that it's the saber form of how to wield an unignited lightsaber, but at the same time, it's really the process decision you make before you ignite the lightsaber, which is interesting because they call it a lightsaber form, but really in the most Jedi way, this is not a lightsaber form at all. This is a thought process. Yeah,
and we were even all talking before, basically, when you see like Qui-Gon and Obi ignite their lightsabers as soon as they see Darth Maul, you're seeing this snap decision through Form 0, where it's basically exactly what you said. We're making a decision to ignite our lightsabers. You just see this quick Form 0 happen. But that's where it gets weird. We're not going to spend too much time on it because it's that would be the most boring deep dive into Form 0 because you don't actually have attacks and stuff. It's more of this pacifist way of how do we avoid conflict mm-hmm. that ends in violence. Mm-hmm. So do you have any thoughts on Form 0?
Yeah, what I was thinking as we were rereading it was, to me, it feels like you have to be pretty confident in your ability to have a threat and not ignite your saber. And so even just that state of mind as a Jedi, just that confidence and all that. So it kind of just shows me a maturity as a Jedi. I obviously there's times like Darth Maul, I think we're all gonna ignite our lightsabers, but also making you think you don't always have to ignite your lightsaber every time there's a threat. There's other options. And so I think it's actually a mature sign of a Jedi.
Cool.
Yeah, 100%. And I think back to a lot of Clone Wars episodes where Anakin's ready to just rip out the lightsaber and jump into action. And maybe we're getting a little Form 0 with Obi-Wan when he's like, well, let's find out what's going on first.
Right.
He's making that decision.
Yeah. And I think part of why we all love Star Wars is that moment when the lightsaber gets ignited. Obviously we
They're
love
so
Star Wars
cool
for a lot
looking.
more, but I don't know, you can see all the flashes and the stuff, and then the more you watch, you're like, certain people fight certain ways. And if you've clicked on a video about the forms, obviously you want to know more about each individual form. So what we're going to do is we're going to assume maybe you don't know anything, so you actually may be more well versed than us on this, but what we're going to do is we're going to briefly kind of say what each form is and its strengths and why it was developed and practitioners, and we're going to freeform discuss each one a little bit. And even as you're watching this, I would encourage you in the comments, like as each form pops up, like don't wait till the end and go off memory. Just start typing in your thoughts about each form and just let it go. Because at the end of the day, we just want this to be like a big discussion about the forms. So let's get started. Form 1. This is like the ancient lightsaber form. Basically, this was before there was like other lightsabers to fight against. It was a transition from like metal sword to lightsabers. And this is Shii-Cho. That's the name for Form 1. And basically, even in the scene where you see the Padawans training, they're learning Form 1. It's the most basic, and basically everything you could think about, like ideals and fundamentals of attacks and parries and target zones, practice drills, all of that. It all started with Form 1. And you really see like Kit Fisto, he was very proficient in Form 1, and he favored it quite a bit too. And Mace Windu, he knew Form 1 really, really well, but later in the video, you'll see why. And Starkiller as well was very well versed in Form 1. But all Jedi start with Form 1. But let's go from there on Form 1. I mean, it's not the most exciting form, but what do you guys...
Well, it's interesting because it's the foundation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Every Jedi knows Form 1, and oftentimes in combat, when something isn't working, they'll fall back to Form 1. It's the form that I know the least about because it's not fun, it's not flashy, it's not exciting.
Yeah.
But I think probably the best on-screen representation of Form 1 is when we see Zet Jacasa, George Lucas's son, when we see him on the platform with the clones, you kind of see this awkward, long, weird, sweeping technique that he's using, and that's Form 1 when he's killing the clones on the platform. And obviously, it's extremely ineffective against blaster fire, and so unfortunately, he meets his demise there. But I mean, you can kind of see that long, sweeping back to a defensive stance. It's very horizontal. It's very kind of vertical. It's just really X and Y axis kind of saber combat, and it's just not meant for blasters.
Yeah.
And you can see why it didn't work for him, but it's what he knew.
Well, and I think with Form 1, obviously it's the most ancient. So when it was developed, there wasn't blasters. It was created, and then obviously times changed and technology advanced, and you had to adapt. So I think Form 1 obviously is the foundation, and it's something that the other forms build upon. And I think it's very important. But yeah, it's not the most flashy, but it is what it is, and we needed it.
Yeah, and what I found, that's such a great that literally is like the perfect picture for Form 1, that scene, because it's like, even when you read about it, right, when it's like, okay, you're holding your lightsaber vertical and you're going basically this way to deflect, like a target coming at you, or it's like if somebody's coming at your head, you reverse it to stop it.
Seems unnatural to me.
And it's like, you do see that, like you said, like you can have all these pictures flash through your mind of like somebody attacking from the top, and that instant, like, boom, I'm gonna stop them. And you can, like, when you think about this, it's like they've been trained who knows how many years and hours in this, and it's like something catches them off guard, and it's just that muscle memory of boom, like, that's right where I'm at. But then if you stick in Form 1, there's a lot of stuff that can take you out really, really quickly.
Things change, and I think it's probably the most relatable form when it comes to combat, because it's very similar to German longsword fencers and HEMA fencing. That's something I've studied extensively, and every single position there is exactly like a HEMA fencer. So
that's awesome.
That's really
it's very, you can actually see, like, when you see that scene in Revenge of the Sith, you can see him go from like Tog, like up to all of the motions are the same. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's super cool, man.
That's awesome.
I didn't even know that. So that's like, and it's obviously, it's like this, all of this was drawn from some real life inspiration. And so it's cool to like be able to like notice and be like, oh man, I know exactly what that is. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so Form 2, this is where it starts picking up and getting a little more exciting. My boy Dooku, he is like the Form 2 master. But Form 2 is Makashi. And essentially this transition, really, it was anticipating something being swung at you, like an enemy swinging something, especially a lightsaber. This is really like lightsaber to lightsaber combat. And Form 2 was really developed kind of to go against those like sweeping movements of Form 1. Essentially, it was going to be more refined and more finesse, and it was going to be more about like precision and efficiency. And you have all sorts of people. Like there's a list. Obviously, you have Dooku, and then Dooku trained Grievous and Asajj, and then you have like Shakti and Qui-Gon, who'd used it. But he mains Form 4, but he also knew Form 2 as well. And then you have Yoda. So Form 2, let's hit it.
Do you want me to just go?
You go.
Yes.
So this is my favorite and least favorite form of all saber forms, because it really encouraged personalization by the user when it came to the form. What I think really made it famous was Dooku and how he kind of put the really like aristocratic spin on form 2. He really kind of brought it in. You don't want to bring it back to the real world, but I think about like Olympic épée fencers. I think about duelists in the 15 and 1600s with rapiers, and that's what I think about when I think about Dooku and Form 2. It was kind of the gentleman's form to me.
Yeah.
It was something that had to be done with massive precision.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't practice that precision, you would just be immediately overwhelmed. It was a very agile, it was a very quick, and it was a very elegant form. And that's why I think a lot of people didn't use it. We saw Asajj use it, but she was nowhere near as elegant and well-versed as Dooku was.
Yeah, and you're so right with Asajj, because you see that training, but then you see her start to favor something else, something more aggressive.
Yeah.
Because Form 2 is very, very defensive. It's very much like I'm anticipating something coming, and I'm deflecting, and I'm really minimal footwork as well. And yeah, I just think of Dooku and Revenge of the Sith. Like
I compare it to like jiu-jitsu almost. You're using your opponent's momentum against them.
Yeah. Really,
you're not outputting as much. I mean, it is offensive, but at the same time, you're really using the person who's attacking you. You're using their momentum against them. That's why it's my favorite, but I also hate it because, well, we can get into the rest later.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, even think about this, when Dooku, basically dismembers Anakin, just as this whoop, like he just takes that momentum and he's like, you messed up. And he just takes him right there. It wasn't this brute force like I'm trying to take you down. It was just this fluid,
very elegant. Yep.
Yeah.
And Form 2 was one of the first forms that actually we started to see specialized saber hilts.
Yeah.
So curved lightsaber hilt, Dooku, that's when we first started to see these kind of specialized lightsaber hilts, was with Form 2.
Yeah, and that is such an interesting point. Honestly, I haven't given much thought to is the hilts and the forms. Like that's a whole nother deep dive, is going into the type of hilt used. And like it's just like, if you were to go out and buy a weapon of any variety, you're probably not just going to blindly point to something. You're going to think about your frame, your hand size, your personality and temperament,
right.
And that's actually a really good point, man. That's cool. So Form 3 now. Form 3, Soresu. This is a very defensive form. And essentially, XWing, you were talking about Form 1 being very ineffective against blaster fire. Essentially, there's no preparation for someone firing a blaster at you, because when it was developed, blasters weren't a thing. So by the time of Form 3 being developed, basically it was developed because blasters were rampant in the galaxy. You have criminals and people, really the underworld belly, using blasters, and it being militarized and all of this. So Form 3, among many other things, was developed to deflect this blaster fire. And a lot of this was really trying to reduce exposed areas of the body. So it's very tight and it's very positional to make sure that you had this great defense around you. And even, what's interesting is that people would say that you had to have a really strong connection to the Force to be able to utilize Form 3 well, because you had to anticipate things before they happened. And you see a lot of people using Form 3, like most famously Obi, and you have Luminar Unduli, Depa Billaba, Kanan, all of these very strong, efficient Jedis. You see them using Form 3. And there's a lot more. That's just barely scratching the surface of it. But let's just keep going. Form 3.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Depo, Balaba, and Kanan kind of go hand in hand there because you're going to pass off what you know. Yeah. But really the master of Soresu is always going to be Obi-Wan Kenobi. And this is something that was stated by Mace Windu in one of the books. He says to him, let me backtrack a little. And now that blasters are absolutely rampant, yes, it's extremely important that these Jedi know how to defend themselves against it. But at the same time, it's also extremely effective against lightsabers as well. So there's a point in the Clone Wars where Mace Windu and Obi-Wan Kenobi are talking, and he says, "Who are you going to send? Who are you going to send where?" And Mace Windu tells Obi-Wan, "You have to go fight Grievous." And he says, "Somebody else can do that. I have to go here." And he goes, "No, you are the master of Soresu." And he goes, "Well, there's another master." He says, "No, you are the master of Soresu." So Grievous is, he might have a blaster, but you have to realize he's going to fight somebody who wields 4 sabers at the same time. He says to him, "You are the master of Soresu," because he knows he can handle Grievous with his defensive bubble better than any other Jedi that's in existence at that point. And something that they highlight so extensively is the way that Obi-Wan really delves himself into the Force and how important that is for Soresu. And so, it's the book. Gotta love the book. Gotta love the book. But you really get a sense of that when he really delves into Soresu, when he really delves himself into the Force, there is not an entity in the galaxy that can penetrate Obi-Wan's Soresu shield, his bubble. Nobody can get through it.
What it makes me think of is like for in particular Obi-Wan and Kanan, because they both survived Order 66 too, and their primary was like defensive, and how the clones attacked was blasters. And obviously I know that's not the only reason, but it's just interesting to think. I wonder if more Jedi favored Form 3 if more would have survived. Again, there's a lot of other factors, but that was just something that was crossing my mind. Interesting.
No, 100%. And like one of my favorite parts of Clone Wars, when we really see 3 shine, is when Ahsoka is being shot at by all the clones, and she deflects all the bolts up into the ceiling and then escapes. That's a perfect Jedi right there. Yeah. But then also, and I guess this is kind of off topic a little bit, but my favorite thing is that the master of defense, Obi-Wan Kenobi, his last act is to release his bubble and allow to be killed. And I thought that was so pertinent. That was just such a beautiful end for him, because he's the master of defense, and the last thing he does is finally let his guard down and be struck down.
Yeah, and I was thinking that same exact thing, because if you do like a really deep analysis of that fight on Mustafar and then the fight on the Death Star between Anakin and Vader and Obi, and all of this, you see even Anakin as Darth Vader change his fighting style, knowing that he has to go in a very different way. And then just the control that Obi-Wan has, like you said, to just release in the moment. And it's interesting, because even with it being said that those with the strongest connection to the Force are really the ones that would master Form 3, for him to then become one with the Force right after that. I think from start to finish, I think Obi's the perfect picture, like you were saying, for Form 3. Like no one else mastered that form like he did.
I think defensive is so important too, because I'm even just thinking of I played soccer for 7 years, and everyone wanted to be offensive. Everyone wanted to be the one scoring the goals, but the real heroes are the defenders and the goalies, and those are the people who survive, with the lightsaber. So just even reminding me of that, I feel like defensive, you need offensive too, but defensive is playing smart. It's being smart about it, being aware, like you said, using the Force, anticipating. It's more than just attack and kill. But so I think Form 3 is actually a very important form for a Jedi, and it's resemblant to me to even that Form 0 of you don't always have to attack. Just look at the moment, look at the options, and do what you need to do in that particular moment. It's not always slash.
Yeah. Hey, defense wins championships, right?
Yeah. What position did you play in soccer?
Left wing. I was both. I was running up and down the field.
I thought you were gonna be defense.
No, I didn't like defense. I wanted to score goals.
So Form 4. This is, for me, this is in the forms where they start to get really, really exciting for me. Forms 1, 2, and 3, you know, all have their strengths and their weaknesses, but this is where things start to advance really quickly, and where a lot of changes are being made, because we're starting to get into more extreme forms of lightsaber combat. So Form 4, which is Ataru, which is most famously Qui-Gon Jinn's form, and Yoda's form as well. This is where it starts to get very acrobatic, and this is really like acrobatic strength and power, and it was actually very controversial. This was something that I didn't really know, like starting to look more into it. Basically, Jedi Knights and Masters were a little more reserved on this because of just some of the dangerous feats that were involved on successfully pulling off Form 4. But then young Padawans got really excited about it because it did give you an upper hand to basically try and root out like crime and evil. So basically, when it's being developed, this transition happening in the Jedi Order, even with focusing more on less in serving and protecting and more in like getting rid of evil, this transition starting to happen. These young Padawans are getting excited because people are seeing like there's some major flaws. There's a lot of open areas of your body in this form, and Darth Maul utilized it, and he utilized basically just this. It's not a cheap shot, but he just utilized the shot with his hilt and killed him right there. But then you see on the flip side, Yoda, with his small size and his speed, like he had no part of his body left open, and really, I mean, you even start getting to things where it says like he's untouchable. Like when he's in the zone, like it's almost impossible to hit him, just because. I mean, here's a perfect example. This is not canon by any means, but if you played Soul Calibur 4 and you've played as Yoda, like you know, like all you got to do is like it's like Form 4 to a T. It's crazy, and he is so annoying to fight because he's so little and fast. But in real Star Wars, it's like you see that very thing play out. So what do you guys want to talk about for Form 4?
Like what I was saying, going to say before, Yoda is my favorite, mainly because of Soul Calibur at first, just because I mained him and I learned how to fight really well with his character, and I learned all the moves. But then it made me pay more attention to him in the movies and in the show, and I just thought it was so cool how he's just hopping around and doing all this crazy cool stuff, and the acrobat. I mean, I was a cheerleader and a gymnast too, so I appreciated that. So I always connected actually with Yoda's fighting. I was like, I want to like learn how to do that stuff and like be flipping around my house with the lightsaber. I thought that would have been cool. I didn't. I guess it's not too late. Maybe one day.
It's never too late.
Yeah.
So go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
Oh, gosh. Well, I was just going to touch on with Yoda, like when you see him fight Dooku, you really see that Form 4 shined in that moment. And obviously
it's my
Yoda,
favorite fight.
He knows and teaches all forms, but it's like in that moment, and when he's fighting Palpatine, we see other instances, but we see a lot of Form 4 with him moving around quickly. And the whole idea was not just to be confusing, but to have strength and power with it.
Like so that you're using momentum.
Yeah, so I'm not just hopping around. There is a confusion aspect, but there's a defense aspect. But there's a lot of running, jumping, spinning with the Force. This idea of moving around to get an upper hand and to strike a pretty serious blow. And so it's like that's why I think when even going back to when we talked about Form 2, it couldn't really stand very well against that, because it can anticipate a lightsaber coming at you, but you had the momentum of the Force like actually propelling someone at you. Like that's a whole nother arena that I can't imagine trying to fight that.
So yeah, when I think about Form 4, everybody goes to Yoda immediately, because we think about that Geonosian hangar scene where we see Yoda just going absolutely nuts. And I adore Ataru, because I mean, think about it, man. You got like people jumping all over the place. You got acrobatics. It's so much fun. Like, look at this. You can't help it as a Star Wars fan. You absolutely adore it. A lot of people don't think about other aspects of it. Darth Maul was a practitioner of Ataru, for sure. I mean, think about all the spinning kicks and things that he did. So Ataru was definitely something where you're incorporating the Force to augment your body, to move in different ways. You're also using kicks and things that you're not seeing from other saber forms. But Anakin Skywalker was another huge practitioner of Ataru, as was an Emperor Palpatine as well. Think about when he's in the office and he...
Oh, spin, yeah.
That's an Ataru move. Now, I don't know if that's confirmed in Star Wars canon, but that looks to me like an Ataru move, right? So
yeah,
I can see it.
And really, I think that's when you're looking at how controversial it was. Like, there's a major upper hand there, but it's like you play big and you could lose big too. And part of it, like if we're ironically, we keep touching these inferences of Form 0 and Form 1. This is where you can start to get away from it because, so you could argue Form 2 was utilized by Dooku and Grievous and Asajj, but really that is from a former Jedi. And when you start getting into like Palpatine and Maul, and I'll leave Anakin out of that because he was a Jedi, but it's like when you start getting into that realm, it's like you start to see Form 4 being utilized by the dark side. And there's another form, later, Form 7, we'll talk about, that has a good inference of this, where it's like the more physically demanding a form became, it was really believed that it brought you closer to the dark side, just because it was really to punish an opponent and to kill them. And so I love the fact that you brought up Maul and Palpatine, because you're right, everybody always focuses, like me, I always focus on the Jedis, but
you just focus on Yoda.
There's a whole world of practitioners out there. That's really cool. So Form 5, this is where it starts to get interesting, especially with variations. We have Shien and its variation Gemso. So basically what this was, there's a lot of strength and a lot of lightsaber deflection as well involved with this. Really, this is where things start to get really, really aggressive. And it was very controversial as well, because it started to get out of the realm of Jedi protecting and serving. And really, it was about achieving peace through superior firepower. Because we want to just really push our strength onto someone and achieve peace through that. And one of the most controversial things that, yes, you see in some other areas, but really is this idea of I'm going to deflect things back with my lightsaber, especially blaster bolts, like intentionally to hurt and to kill someone. And that's one aspect. But then you also have Gemso, which you see with Anakin Skywalker, which was that lightsaber dueling aspect. Like basically Form 5 was developed because they thought Form 3 was too passive and Form 4 wasn't powerful enough. And so it's this idea of we are going to put all of our strength and power into Form 5. And it makes so much sense for Anakin with what he wanted to accomplish through his life and to never be weak again. And so with Form 5, I know it can be hard going into I guess the Shien side or the Gemso side, but just kind of free form on 4-5, this idea of like peace through superior firepower. Let's get into it.
I think honestly, Form 5 is kind of getting away from the Jedi, like what the Jedi are for, and like just the reason they exist was for peace, not peace through, aggressive killing. So, but I see the benefit too, and I think there's a fine line where like a good Jedi walks along that line, but I think it could also be very easy, and we see it with Anakin, where then you get pulled the wrong way. But like Aayla Secura, like she seemed fine and was Form 5. So I think, like we've said in the beginning, it depends on personality, and there's a lot of other factors as well, but I do see it teetering on a more dangerous path, I guess, for the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
So, this was really a response to 3.
Yeah.
I think as things started to get a little bit more hostile and Jedi started to need to be a little bit more aggressive. I mean, obviously, we think of aggressive when we think of this, but at the same time, they were two very different forms, because I think one was a lot more focused on blaster fire, while the other was a little bit more focused on saber combat. But at the same time, it was a response to 3. In thinking that 3 was too defensive and now we have to be too aggressive, but it lacked a lot of the defensive capabilities that were necessary. It was really focused on ending a fight as quickly as possible by overpowering your opponent, which is not something that the Jedi should ever have focused on. Mm-hmm. And it was not like Form 2 was so focused on disarming your opponent without killing them, whereas Shien was really about ending the fight quickly.
Yeah. And I think part of what's hard, I think if you look at a good end of Form 5, I think Aayla Secura is the more She's the more like moderate side of it.
Right.
She can handle it really well. But then you can see with Anakin, where, and again, he's not limited to Form 5, but he gets hot-blooded. And it's when you have the idea of, I want to end this quickly, and it's through strength and power, which he has. It's really hard to cool down.
Yeah.
And things can just get crazy.
And he says it, no, I'll end it now. And he's like, Anakin, no.
Yeah. And Form 5, I will say that was entertaining, like, to watch. Like, I love watching Anakin fight. He's one of my favorite people to watch.
Oh, yeah.
So let's get into Form 6. We have 2 more forms to go through. So Form 6, Niman. This is a very complicated form, and you'll see why. But essentially what this was, really at the time of the Battle of Geonosis, like, you're starting to see this used a lot more. Like, it's starting to be more fully developed. And even before we get into what it is, you had to dedicate at least 10 years to become proficient at this, just to begin to understand how to use this properly, because it's pulling techniques from Form 1, Form 3, Form 4, and Form 5. And really what it was doing is it was taking the best of everything and it was trying to put it in moderation. And really the goal, right? And I would say it's the most anticlimactic to watch, because it's like, essentially what they wanted is a peaceful resolution without bloodshed, like
with a lightsaber.
Like, best case scenario, we just don't want the downfall, I guess, of every other form. And but what's hard about this form is it was criticized because it wasn't very effective on the battlefield, because that wasn't really the end goal of the form. But this is where you have like Darth Maul shines in Form 6, because he knows a lot of stuff. Obi, Anakin, they really get into this realm where they could. Form 6 is almost an anomaly within itself, because there's not necessarily individual moves where it's like, this is particularly Form 6. You see it because somebody's spent 10 years becoming proficient in other forms. And so situationally they can choose what to use. And it's a level of thinking that's crazy. But then you also have people who, like Darth Maul, for instance, who manipulates it and twists it. And it's like, instead of using it with minimal bloodshed, he's like, I want maximum bloodshed. How can I use the best parts of this to kill as many people as I can, in particular Jedi? So it kind of backfired in a way against them.
Yeah, I can agree. I think Niman was basically a failure by the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
100%. Because if you create a saber style that takes 10 years to master, you're only going to have one of two things. One, you're going to have a bunch of Jedi who are incompetent swordsmen, or you're going to have a bunch of extremely competent swordsmen, in which case you've basically created an army as opposed to peacekeepers. So I think that was a failure on the part of the Jedi Order, where it would have been better to have certain Jedi focus on certain things, like with Obi-Wan, with Soresu. He's the negotiator. He wants to talk, but if somebody attacks him, he's going to spend the entire time wearing the person out and then hopefully arrest them. Great. Yeah. But you send a Niman practitioner to go fight Grievous and he's dead in 2 seconds. Or he's really, really good and ends up killing him. Yeah. So I hate Dex. I mean, it was it was a total failure, because it's a jack of all trades and a master of nothing. So I don't like it.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I don't really have anything more to say. I think that covers it on that. There's not much more to it. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there is, but not in my mind.
And and obviously if you've made it this far in the video, you understand the point of this wasn't a deep dive into all of the minutia of the form. It is looking a lot at how are these forms pulled off, but then it's also what are the shortcomings and the advantages. And sadly, the bittersweet irony of Niman is that it did not end well. And if you look at the timeline, I mean, realistically, the Battle of Geonosis, that's where I guess you could say that was the peak of Niman users, because all of these Jedi during the Clone Wars are dedicating so much time at this point. They're like, now's our time to shine. Like, we've been spending all this time learning all these different forms, and now I can finally start putting it into practice. And it ends up, XWing, you said it perfectly, ends up being exactly against the reason it was created. It's
Petranaki was not a good day for the Jedi.
No.
Yeah.
Yes. So finally, we are at Form 7. This is a very interesting form. It is widely regarded as the most difficult form to master because you really had to be a high-level master in multiple forms. So Form 7 is known as Juyo or Vaapad, and basically with this, you have a lot of very bold and direct movements. There's a lot of people, but Mace Windu uses Form 7 really, really well. And the idea of Form 7 was essentially to have what seemed like random attacks, but they were really just unconnected, short burst attacks and movements that would keep someone off guard. And so it wasn't just like swinging wildly and doing all this stuff. It was very, very intentional at making sure that's like you were in control. And it's like if somebody was expecting, almost like in boxing terms, like jab, jab, hook, jab, jab, hook, like you're doing, like you're breaking all of the rules and you're doing these things that are very physically demanding. And it was very kinetic, but we referenced this earlier. This one, even Mace Windu himself would say, in comics and things, that this would actually bring people close to the dark side of the Force because of how physically demanding and aggressive and violent it was. And so there wasn't many people who really started to delve into this because almost a counter to Niman, where you had all these people learning all of these things. It's like the masters, the people who figured out how to use all these forms perfectly. Really, it's like these are really the only people that could really start to use Form 7 for what it was intended to do. So let's dig in.
Yeah, Form 7. I like this one. I like this one because it's less about really... this is tough to describe. It's less about really what the form can do as much as what the Jedi that's using it can do.
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah, because Juyo obviously outlawed by the Jedi Order. They're like, yeah, he can't use that because it brought so many close that it brought them over because you were using your emotions unchecked.
Yeah.
Was basically the thing with Juyo. You were using not the dark side so much as you were using dark thoughts and the pain and the emotion inside your body, and it brought you close enough that it would usually pull you over. And so when Mace Windu created Vaapad, it was the only one that was recognized, the only new one that was recognized by the Jedi Order, because he was able to use it without ever getting close enough that it would pull him to the dark side. So that was the really interesting thing about Vaapad, is that he was able to use the enemy's emotions to fuel his ability to fight. So I love Vaapad. It's like, and I've heard it called so many things. Somebody's going to yell at you in the comments and say it's called Vaapad or Vaapad or something like that. But
I'm sure the second A is silent, and
who knows? But it's just such a cool form because it's so out of the norm, and it fits with nothing. You have to realize these saber forms there are centuries in between each saber form as they come along. It's not like 25 years and they came up with a new one. 25 years, it's hundreds of years in between, and to have his recognized in an era that we know very well in the prequels, for him to create that in his lifetime is awesome.
Yeah.
So I love Vaapad.
Yeah.
I feel like the best example of it is in Revenge of the Sith when he's confronting Palpatine, right?
The ultimate Vaapad opponent, right?
For real.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a cool scene. Like, just like when Mace Windu walks in and his confidence and just how he carries himself and how that fight goes. It could have been very different if Anakin wasn't there. But yeah, I think it's an interesting one, and it's one that I know the least about, and the one I don't understand much at all. Because I don't feel like I've seen much of it. I really can only point out that one scene because I haven't read the comics, or well, even in those you don't really get to see it. But it's one that intrigues me and I want to learn more about.
Yeah. And, even as we wrap this all up, just kind of a reflective or a retrospective, like thinking all the way back to Form 1, like when you're transitioning from metal swords to lightsabers, and how simplistic things were and how simplistic combat was, to then seeing you got spooked by our cat, but seeing how simplistic things were to then blasters entering the equation and other lightsabers, and then we're going to use the Force to actually manipulate the strength and speed and movement of our bodies. And you start getting into really aggression, and it's like you want to end something quickly, and now we're going to take the best out of everything, and now we're actually going to utilize really these kind of forbidden thoughts and memories and emotions within us. It's so interesting to see how things transition all across these lightsaber forms, and I just find it so fascinating. Like you said, hundreds of years in between these. So let's do this as a final send off with this. This may be hard, but what would you guys say, like, your favorite lightsaber form is? Like, if you were a Jedi and you had to pick a lightsaber form, which one would you choose?
4.
You'd pick 4?
Mm-hmm.
I love to watch Ataru, but I would be a Soresu practitioner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
What about you? 7?
No, I think Gemso. I think Form 5.
Really?
I think so.
That.
I mean, I think my personality is like an all in. Like, if I'm gonna do something, I want it done. And so even when I play games, I'm usually like a hack and slash. Like, that's a
Me too, man.
to a fault. I run into battle, and so I think I think that's the form I would pick for sure.
I think it makes sense.
I don't know how it would end for me. Probably not like Anakin. I'd probably be done a lot sooner. But
I did that in a horror game the other day. It didn't work out. I'm like, to battle! And I ran in and I died because I had nothing but a camera. So
you're like, nope, didn't work.
yeah, it didn't work. Son of a gun.
Awesome. Well, with that, this ended up being a little longer than we were expecting, but nonetheless, the whole point of this was to really talk about each form a little bit more, and to hopefully, for somebody that's been interested in like a longer conversation on each of these forms, so like really just join us and jump in. And there's actually a link to XWing in the description. Like, we're good friends. Like, we do stuff on each other's channels all the time, and so make sure you go sub to him as well. But with that, we are 2 Star Wars nerds. That is XWing, and may the Force be with you always.